to succeed at the international level. And here we go, turn one of our first game of top 8. It is the Incineroar and that Ursaluna alongside the Basculegion and Rillaboom for Gabriel Agati. So insane value on that Intimidate from that Incineroar.
Not only that, this Ursaluna carries a little secret with it in that it has a water type terrestrialization it can use maybe once this Rillaboom has been intimidated or parting shot another time or just scared off the field.
Yeah, we've seen Gabriel do this before. Switch in the Politoed, go for the terrestrialization on that Basculegion to try and get as much surprise damage out as possible here on turn 1. Last time it was through an Intimidate before as well and into a terrestrialized Volcarona, so it actually didn't do as much damage as Gabriel wanted it to do. This time around, that Basculegion is still intimidated, but there is no terrestrialization here, and the fake out activating the Chilan Berry on Politoed. Unfortunately, you would rather have that happen on a Hyper Voice or a Blood Moon, but for its trouble, Basculegion will get almost a one-hit KO on that Incineroar, activating the Citrus Berry. That Intimidate remains crucial in controlling the power of that Basculegion.
But a very safe target there from Gabriel, avoiding the Ursaluna Blood Moon on the off chance it went for Protect that turn and guaranteeing that you can pivot the Rillaboom right back in.
The Incineroar took a bunch of damage, but it is going to be in threat in the future, and the Rillaboom on that switch in survives the Blood Moon that certainly that Basculegion would have struggled with.
And now, not only that, the Rillaboom was able to drop the Intimidate from that Incineroar at the beginning of the game. It's back on the field, it's at full power, it has the grassy terrain, and it's threatening a huge wood hammer into the Ursaluna Blood Moon.
Absolutely, regardless of if it terrestrializes.
Exactly.
There's Incineroar switching out. It is feeling very threatened, staring down this Politoed. That's going to be the Rillaboom switching in for Juan, and Ursaluna under threat of that Woodhammer will protect itself as Rillaboom also just pivoting on Gabriel's side. A perfect call out there, deals so much damage into that Rillaboom on the switch in. And now Gabriel gets to decide what Pokemon does he want to bring out. It is the Ninetales, and of course it's the Ninetales staring down a Rillaboom and a Blood Moon Ursaluna that just protected. And now, Rillaboom, you are stuck in here with this Ninetales.
So maybe you can fake out one more time, but unfortunately your pal in the back of your party will not be able to substitute in for you to dodge any threat of a Blizzard from the Ninetales. Ninetales could also opt to try and go for an Encore here. You know, we did just see a Pokemon use Protect, and it's always a little bit tempting to go for that, but I do think that if Gabriel tries to land an Encore at this point in time, it's a little bit risky. It's not necessarily
still got the fake out.
Exactly. Like, you don't have to go for that big of a risk when you have this much of an advantage. You can pretty safely go for Protect here, maybe try and set up a Whirlpool onto the opposing Ursaluna, and that way you know your opponent can't switch next turn, and then you can start going for those Blizzards.
I mean, regardless, you could just go for the Whirlpool on whatever is there and just prevent any of this pivoting happening from the Incineroar or the Rillaboom. This is why the Politoed has been so strong. Fake out connects into the Protect. Gabriel is really excited about that one, getting the call correctly, and Ursaluna is now stuck in this field alongside the Politoed and the Alolan Ninetales as well. And that's the Blood Moon into the Protect as well. Gabriel gets everything on that turn.
I think it's about to get a little chilly in here. It's about time as the sun has been
turned on.
Yeah, the sun has been blazing all day in this convention center, and that's exactly what Gabriel wants at this point in time. Juan could try and go for a double Protect here, let the Rillaboom go down, and then the Incineroar can come back in and, you know, provide fake out support, and you could try and wiggle your way around, but Gabriel has such a huge lead, and it's all thanks to Whirlpool and Politoed.
Yeah, and the most important thing about this is, like, the Ninetales has opportunities to go for Encores, but really, why bother? You just they're trapped in here with the Politoed. You can just go for the big damage with that Blizzard.
Exactly, and Politoed doesn't even necessarily have to stay on the field at this point. If you switch out, Whirlpool will expire. but one Blizzard is probably all you need at this point.
Yeah, you're at least going to deal big damage to one of these Pokemon and force a Terastallization on the other, as Juan is going to go ahead and decide that the Ursaluna is the more important Pokemon to protect here. Goes for the Water Terastallization on that Pokemon to resist an incoming Blizzard, but Gabriel, recognizing that perfect play, in comes the Rillaboom, tanks that Grassy Glide, and is now ready to punish that Terastallization.
And look at how that Rillaboom goes down on Juan's side of the field. Gabriel now has the Pokemon advantage and keeps the momentum going.
The Earth Power, though, will connect onto Ninetales, so some damage will be traded back onto Gabriel's Ninetales. Both the Ninetales and the Rillaboom are a little bit low, and Juan does have the ability to switch in the Incineroar to start pivoting and getting those Intimidates down onto that Rillaboom.
And that will matter, as now this Ursaluna Blood Moon is still susceptible to that Woodhammer, but instead it's actually going to be the Sneasler coming in, activating the Unburden ability, getting that defense boost with the Grassy Seed. And I think that's a good play here, if only because now the Acrobatics will also threaten the Rillaboom in return.
Yeah, there's certainly a risk that switching in the Incineroar is a little bit too passive.
Exactly.
And you may just want to save that Intimidate for a higher value target like the Basculegion.
Exactly, and after Unburden as well, that Sneasler will outspeed the Alolan Ninetales, so going for another Blizzard, not that you would necessarily want to with these two Pokemon on the field, doesn't feel as comfortable anymore. You also are stopping the threat of an Encore or a Disable from this Ninetales, so you're forcing Gabriel to really be on the back foot once again, and that's how you stop the momentum.
Yeah, and this is actually a really awkward position for Gabriel. The Sneasler is exerting a lot of pressure here. Politoed will switch back in so that there is more risk of trapping to trap the Sneasler and then deal with it as it wants, but the close combat is enough to pick up the KO onto the Ninetales. Politoed switching in removed the defense buff of the snow on that Pokemon, and instead Ninetales goes down, Politoed switches in, and will have to tank this Blood Moon from the Ursaluna, and does not have its berry to reduce the damage because it was blown by the Fake Out earlier.
But look at how much damage it ended up doing regardless.
Imagine if it had the berry.
I know. I mean, that's great information for Juan going into a potential Game 2 or Game 3, but still, the Politoed is known to be one of the more bulkier, if not the bulkiest rain setter in the format. And this is why you want to run it, because you can tank those hits and you can pivot yourself into positions where Politoed can afford to take damage on the switch.
All right, well, here comes the Basculegion alongside the Politoed. So now the rain is going to be powering up that Basculegion significantly alongside the Terastallization. But the Sneasler is still going to be the fastest thing out on the field because of that Unburden boost. And that means that Juan is going to be able to swing and does still have the option to continue to switch in that Incineroar now that the Whirlpool trap was broken earlier.
Exactly, and this Basculegion is also susceptible to a close combat from this Sneasler, as it's no longer a ghost type. This Basculegion really is the most powerful attacker that Gabriel has left, so he has to be very smart in how he plays it moving forwards.
Well, Sneasler recognizes that it is a top threat here, goes for a Protect and gets the Protect on the Basculegion, which whiffs that Wave Crash right into it. That means that Politoed, though, is going to go for a Perish Song and start saying, hey, you've got to start switching around or you're going to have to deal with my Politoed or something, because when the Perish Song ends, the slowest Pokemon on the field will be the last Pokemon to faint. And you know what? I think Gabriel would be totally happy for these two Pokemon to be gone from one side.
Exactly, but it is worth noting that the Ursaluna is actually the slowest Pokemon on the field. So you definitely want to consider getting the Sneasler out of there, and it's possible that with the rain, with the Terastallization and the adaptability ability on that Basculegion, Flip Turn could threaten a one-hit knockout after the defensive drop as well from the close combat. But if the Ursaluna, hypothetically speaking, is on the field when Perish Song expires and Gabriel doesn't switch out his own Pokemon, that's now a win condition for Juan.
Yeah, it could be in the future. These Pokemon counts are still at 3 each, so they are able to switch out unless Politoed is able to start trapping things with that Whirlpool.
Exactly.
But Juan has the pressure here with that Sneasler.
He does, and it's such an interesting board state because Gabriel was the one who set it up himself.
Absolutely, but Gabriel just using that Perish Song likely to try to force a switch at some point out of these Pokemon and regain some momentum so that Basculegion could maybe get a little bit safer, but this Rillaboom is just taking a close combat on the switch, and that is a KO, and that's going to force the Basculegion out regardless. So no hiding from this damage from the Sneasler for Gabriel.
And unfortunately, Politoed cannot hide from its own song. But this Weather Ball will do a one-hit knockout onto that Sneasler.
Okay. Well, now there is the win condition for the Ursaluna to be knocked out, but likely the Basculegion, being Choice Scarf, isn't going to have an opportunity to do that, and having the Terastallization already, Incineroar should be able to help its buddy Ursaluna clean this one up.
Yeah, what a great end game from Juan. I think we talked about this earlier, being able to utilize the team's pivots and the little things that make this team important to his advantage to find the openings. Sneasler coming in at the right time, being faster than the Alolan Ninetales, was exactly when the tide turned for Juan. Now he can use Fake Out, attack with the Ursaluna, and then follow it up with 2 attacks, and that Basculegion male should go down.
Absolutely. There's the Fake Out. That's going to be the flinch on Basculegion, and this Blood Moon Ursaluna with the Earth Power cleaning this one up, knocking that Pokemon out, and Juan Salerno from Argentina is going up 1-0 in this best of 3 set. But I think there is a lot to like there if you are a Gabriel Agati fan, as many of the people in our hometown crowd are. I really enjoyed watching the Politoed sort of prevent and block out the pivots coming out from the Incineroar and the Rillaboom. It's just that it didn't seem like Gabriel got enough out of it. Once again, we saw that Basculegion go for a Terastallization very early on, trying to sneak its KO and miss out on it.
And that's really good information, though, going into Game 2, that you will miss that knockout, because now Gabriel can play around that. I think the other thing that I want to call out was the use of Perish Song on the Politoed, especially after seeing the knockout from the Weather Ball. Perish Song is great, don't get me wrong, but you really want to use it in a 3 versus 2 or a already trapped situation. The fact that Gabriel used it before those conditions were set to try and force Juan to switch, and Juan was just, quite frankly, knew that he already had the game locked up, it just wasn't enough. And I think that you really have to maybe rely on Whirlpool in that end game first if you're going to just make a playstyle adaptation as opposed to a Pokemon one.
Or just go for the KO immediately.
Yeah,
like we saw
exactly.
on that Sneasler a few turns later. If you have the damage, go for the damage. Then Perish Song would be able to deal with those final 2 Pokemon in the back. But that's something that's all information that now Gabriel and Juan both know. So we might expect to see some switch-ups here going into Game 2.
Exactly, and I do think that on paper, Politoed is still a solid pick, because forcing your opponent to not be able to switch, especially when they want to use the pivot pals to their advantage, is always going to be incredibly disruptive.
Yeah, well, here is a big switch-up for Gabriel. That's going to be the Ninetales and a Volcarona. So if there is a Pokemon that can make use of getting some free turns, it is a Volcarona here. That, of course, is going to be matched by Juan going with the Ursaluna and Dragonite on his end, the same lead as Game 1, but instantly threatened by Ice-type damage from this Ninetales.
Not only that, because there's this instant pressure from the Alolan Ninetales, that opens up this opportunity for the Volcarona to sort of feel out the situation, try and get some quiver dances in early on in the game, and we've seen how much that can put you ahead.
Okay, the Water Terastallization once more forced out on the Ursaluna on Juan's side. As soon as the Ninetales hits the field, Juan knows that he has to go ahead and protect that Pokemon. Gabriel will go ahead and protect the Volcarona here, knows that the only option for Dragonite to deal damage is into that Pokemon. The Blizzard deals a lot of damage, but the multi-scale really helping out there. High value protect. The Dragonite is unable to do anything here, and that puts Tailwind at risk, and a double whip into the protect from Juan. Volcarona is happy to stand in front of these Pokemon and say, come at me.
Not only that, the fact that Juan wants that Volcarona gone could be some incredible information for Gabriel on what Juan has in the back. For now, though, another Blizzard from this Ninetales feels very safe. You do still have the Focus Sash activated. You know that the Dragonite is still going to be slower, as Scale Shot did not connect and did not give it that speed boost, and that is exactly why Juan is forced to switch here to send in something like an Incineroar who can take that attack way better.
Yeah, Incineroar is definitely going to be able to take a Blizzard way better, as well as a Heat Wave potential from Volcarona, but Gabriel is actually just showing an instant Terastallization to go for the other offensive option on the Volcarona. Wants to make sure that he has access to Fairy-type damage against both of these Pokemon, potentially also to threaten the Dragonite as well. Another Fairy-type means that Dragonite is not really a threat at all. Both the Ursaluna and Incineroar do have to take this Blizzard on the switch-in as the Terra Blast connects onto the Blood Moon Ursaluna, dealing good damage. Another Blizzard and another Terra Blast would be more than enough to KO that Ursaluna. But as you mentioned, going for the Yawn, so Gabriel knowing can't just go for Quiver Dances here if this Pokemon is just going to get put to sleep.
And this is the perfect opportunity now to get a different Pokemon on the field for Gabriel that can potentially return and intimidate. There is no downside to switching out this Volcarona, as other than the Terastallization, which is very beneficial like you just called out, you have not invested any Quiver Dances. You've only really done damage from this Pokemon.
You are going to lose your Grassy Seed boost, but by Terastallizing into the Fairy typing, not a lot of threat on Juan's side that you have to be worried about there. And with the Incineroar in the back, getting the Intimidate down onto the Incineroar and any other potential physical attackers in the future, will have an ability to potentially come back in pretty safely. There's the Flare Blitz that comes out into the Incineroar, protecting the Volcarona as Encore connects onto Ursaluna into Yawn. So this Pokemon will no longer be able to fire off those Blood Moons or Earth Powers and will be stuck yawning for the foreseeable future.
The Incineroar is more than happy, though, to rely on its Pivot Pal to avoid being put to sleep at the end of the turn. That's the downside to utilizing Yawn as your move that puts Pokemon to sleep, as it takes a turn to activate. It's not like Sleep Powder, where the accuracy is the downfall, or Spore, where unless your name is Smeargle, you're going to be using on a Pokemon that's typically very slow. This Incineroar doesn't have Parting Shot, but or this Incineroar does have Parting Shot, so this is the perfect opportunity to weaken the Ursaluna alongside of it.
Yeah, and Encore comes out onto the Incineroar, locking it into Flare Blitz, which is going to deal decent damage to the Ninetales, and with a burn, starts putting a timer on that Pokemon. Can negate that somewhat by getting the Rillaboom in for grassy terrain, but another Yawn is just going to fail into the Incineroar. And the slow Incineroar with the Parting Shot will drop the special attack of that Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is already weaker than we're used to seeing because it's the Leftovers variant, not the Life Orb.
And I'm so glad you called out the fact that the Incineroar is the slower variant, because that is key to keep in mind with how these Incineroar will interact. If we get into a Parting Shot situation where they're both Parting Shot each other, you want to be the slower Parting Shot so your drops stick.
And I actually love this Encore into the Incineroar. It all makes sense now. That prevented a Parting Shot from coming out, which means that there is no fake out pressure, so this Ursaluna is not going to be able to protect itself from getting Disable Encore.
Or it will be forced to switch out, at which point you can deal some damage with Blizzard, or maybe even try and fire a Terra Blast into that spot.
Yeah, and that also opens up free space for the Volcarona to start buffing itself, and Rillaboom is forced to switch into a Ninetales and a Volcarona. That feels really, really bad. And actually, the Grassy Seed had not been activated yet. It's only on the switch-in that Volcarona is able to get that defense boost. The Disable will fail, but it did force out the Ursaluna, and now Volcarona is starting to dance.
And getting that boost in defense right before you're the potential target of a Flare Blitz as a now Fairy-type Pokemon. What incredible timing!
Wow. Perfect timing there on the Disable and on the Encore previously. Really well played, really heads up play. That's such a complex interaction to think about when you're using a Pokemon like Ninetales.
You do have to worry now about the threat of fake out onto either the Ninetales or the Volcarona, but Volcarona with the Flame Body ability carries the threat of burning any Pokemon that isn't a fire type that makes contact with it. So overall, the Rillaboom on Juan's side of the field probably wants to avoid attacking this Volcarona altogether.
Yeah, most likely wants to avoid it. And also, you have the boost on the Quiver Dance, so you're threatening damage right now from a Heat Wave. The Terastallization was already forced, so there's no way for Rillaboom, except for faking out the Volcarona, to stop that from happening. And even if it does, it just got intimidated, so there's really no risk of damage on this Volcarona, which is why the Incineroar has to switch out and the Ursaluna comes back in.
It certainly will be able to take this Heat Wave a lot better, but good information for the future. Rillaboom was able to hang on.
It was able to hang on, but with the defense boost and the Intimidate, Volcarona is actually able to tank that Woodhammer pretty well out of Grassy Glide range, and the recoil damage has dealt significant damage back to the Rillaboom. And now this Ursaluna is out on the field, and that means that there could be yawns, but it's now at a point where it is at about 55% of its health, and Terra Blast with that boost may be enough to get it close. With a double up on the Incineroar, definitely.
A lot of times these leftovers Ursaluna Blood Moons, especially when grassy terrain is still active on the field, will take a moment to protect, to try and recover some health back. But I worry that if Juan decides to go for that move, that's just going to give Gabriel the opportunity to pivot his own Rillaboom in and once again start to threaten that Pokemon.
Yeah, but there's no need to even worry about that because fake out pressure from Incineroar means that this Ursaluna just isn't going to get to move. Juan is forced to retreat Rillaboom for the Incineroar of his own because he needs to be able to deal some damage back to this Volcarona. There's the Protect coming out from Ursaluna. The Fake Out will whiff into the Protect, but this Incineroar is not going to enjoy taking a Terra Fairy Terra Blast on the switch in from a +1 Volcarona.
It connects, and it's going to bring that Incineroar down into the red. Not quite enough for a knockout there, but certainly quite enough to make Juan think carefully about his next moves, as even though there hasn't been a Pokemon knockout yet in this match, the damage is really starting to add up on Juan Salerno's side of the field.
Yeah, the only Pokemon that's actually doing okay right now is that Blood Moon Ursaluna that's been able to recover so much health. That Dragonite, remember, took a Blizzard at the very start. That Rillaboom took a Heat Wave, and now after that Incineroar took that big Terra Fairy Terra Blast. The Citrus Fairy helped a little bit, but it's definitely within another Terra Blast range.
Even though the Ursaluna Blood Moon has all that health, though, it doesn't have the offensive power to match. Without the Sneasler that Juan brought in game number 1, there is just no offensive momentum now that this Volcarona has gotten that single Quiver Dance up. Juan has to target down that Pokemon if he wants his way through this match, and that's exactly why Gabriel's protecting it.
Yeah, and that's exactly why Gabriel gets just this easy free turn of grassy terrain recovery. Another double up into the Protect. We've seen this over and over again on these Volcarona teams. They are so threatening that you are forced to target it, because if you ever let that Pokemon get a swing at you, then you might just lose the game right then and there.
This parting shot, though, will make it that much tougher for the opposing Ursaluna Blood Moon to find that damage, and also give the Rillaboom the opportunity to find that alignment, that chance to go for another Wood Hammer into that spot unintimidated. Now, Juan could switch out the Blood Moon Ursaluna once again to something that can take that attack better, but what do you switch into? Do you switch
anything?
Do you switch into your own Rillaboom, who's already taken damage and could just have to take a Heat Wave? Do you switch into the Dragonite, who's already taken a ton of damage? Not a lot of options left.
Yeah, not a lot of options left for Juan on this game. Gabriel is doing a great job of just removing all of Juan's agency. Gabriel has been in control for a while in this game, ever since that Ninetales was able to successfully get those Encores off and really stall out everything Juan was trying to do. Juan brings in the Dragonite here, but it's actually just going to take a Terra Blast on the switch-in. So a sacrificial Dragonite here to potentially get an Intimidate down onto the Rillaboom on Gabriel's side, because The Rillaboom is absolutely ready to knock out that Ursaluna with a wood hammer.
Exactly, and I think with that KO, it's pretty safe to say that Gabriel, unless something crazy happens, like a critical hit from a Blood Moon on this Ursaluna Blood Moon, Gabriel Agati's has a huge lead and most likely will be bringing us into a game 3, which does make me wonder what exactly Juan is thinking about in terms of adaptations, because I don't think you can leave it all in this Blood Moon Ursaluna's hands if you are assuming that Gabriel will bring the Volcarona. We did not see that in game number 1, and you can see why it was the adaptation in this game number 2, because it has been an absolute force.
And we've been just in a weird, awkward position if you're a Juan especially. We're kind of just trading protects back and forth. The Blood Moon Ursaluna is back up to basically full health, but so is the Volcarona. All of that damage that Juan was able to get off onto that Pokemon, the damage that Gabriel traded to get those Encores down, is gone.
I think the major difference, though, is that the Volcarona has only gotten boosts, and Juan Salerno's Blood Moon Ursaluna has only gotten stat drops from the parting shot.
And this fake out dodged once again by the Protect, and the Volcarona spending another turn safe from everything, and especially these Blood Moons are being staggered into the Protect as well. The most powerful option that Juan can go for against that Volcarona are just, it's timed such that Gabriel will always have Protect up when Juan also has Blood Moon up.
I love how he's managing all these turns as well, because there's no need to go for another Quiver Dance. He's not taking that risk. And I do feel like a lesser experienced player would have been tempted to try and sneak another Quiver Dance or 2 in. And just having the mastery and the confidence to know, I do not need that. This single Quiver Dance is enough. I just need to keep pivoting my Incineroar, my Rillaboom to keep the pressure on the opposing Ursaluna. That's all I need to win. That is such an incredible call from Gabriel, and it's really exciting to see this play out in real time. Now, it's not quite over yet, but it's still, again, it's just looking so much in his favor right now.
Yeah, definitely looking in Gabriel's favor, but we also have to consider that time may become relevant, as this has been going on for a while now. But Gabriel getting another KO onto that Incineroar with that Terra Fairy Terra Blast means Juan is now down to his final 2 Pokemon. However, there is a world where Juan could set it up such that the Ursaluna Blood Moon with the Leftovers recovery and Grassy Terrain recovery could end the game with more health than another Pokemon on the other side of the field. But as long as Gabriel maintains this Pokemon advantage and is able to find these opportunities, he should be more than capable of just closing this one out, and time may just become an opportunity for him to win.
I was going to say, I mean, we have time. We might as well review the tiebreakers while we're here, as given how this game has gone, you have to wonder if it will come into play for game number 3, or if we're going to see both these trainers just hit the gas. So, you know, while we're here for a moment, let's go ahead and talk about how tiebreakers work in the Video Game Championship Series now. There are 4 Pokemon on the field for Gabriel Agati. There are only 2 remaining for Juan Salerno. The first tiebreaker will be the number of Pokemon remaining. So Juan Salerno needs to find 2 KOs, possibly 3, given how low that Rillaboom is, to even out the Pokemon count. The next tiebreaker would be the percentage of health remaining. So if this Ursaluna was able to keep its health at 100% and the Volcarona would be less than 100%, then Juan Salerno finds the win condition for the game. If Volcarona,
we're 3 ifs deep now.
Yeah, if the Volcarona is also at 100% health, then it comes down to who has the higher HP stat. And traditionally speaking, we obviously don't know how these Pokemon are trained. Ursaluna Blood Moon does have a higher base HP stat in comparison to your average Volcarona. So that has been your lesson. Thank you so much for giving me exactly enough time to review that. Let's go ahead and talk about game number 3.
Let's go into game number 3. Juan, I think may have been going over, wanted that refresher on the tiebreaker as well, and got his information and is ready to go to game 3.
I'm happy I could help.
Absolutely. Good job, Gabby. And I love that Juan was taking that time to think about it. Obviously, Juan was on the back foot for a while there. He tried to find some ways back into the game, but when you have this time, you do have the ability to start planning for game 3.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so difficult sometimes, especially when you're watching a game like this. I think a lot of people at home are like, y'all, it's over, you know, why don't we go ahead and get to game number 3? But if you know that you only have like a minute and a half in team preview. You know, it's not like you can just sit at the team selection screen and spend 5 minutes trying to decide what song you want to listen to during the game. You might as well utilize the turns remaining, the 45 seconds you're given to select your moves, in addition to the animations, the switch times, all of that extra time to think through your game plan.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Juan was doing there. And now we head into game 3. And it really felt like Gabriel had won that on turn 1, getting the Dragonite and Ursaluna matched up against the Volcarona and Ninetales. This time around, Juan adjusts. It's the Incineroar and Ursaluna against the Volcarona and Ninetales, not that Dragonite that frankly did 0 in game 2.
So already Juan Salerno has a huge advantage with the pressure of fake out from that Incineroar, but Gabriel Agati has the perfect response. You can just protect twice this turn. See what the Ursaluna Blood Moon does. If it goes straight for a Blood Moon into the Volcarona, even better.
Even better. And of course, fake out open. If Juan does go for the fake out, that opens up threat of Encore to lock that Incineroar into that attack. So there's a very safe double protect here. Juan will go for the fake out onto the Ninetales, so just trying to see what this Ursaluna is going to do. It was the Blood Moon, so the Blood Moon is now once again timed with the protect on Volcarona.
There's also an interesting option from this Ninetales. You could Encore the fake out like you mentioned. You could disable the Blood Moon if you're worried about a water type terrestrialization, or you could just utilize Blizzard if you think there is going to be a Rillaboom switching in. Now, we saw Gabriel play very safely in that game number 2, especially around the usage of the Volcarona, and I think moving forwards he needs to keep that safety in play to keep that momentum again. And Juan Salerno already forced to respond. Not a turn 1 terrestrialization, but still essentially the same board state we saw in game number 2.
Yeah, but that's kind of an uh-oh moment with the Ursaluna going for the terrestrialization. That means that the Incineroar did not go to switch out. That means that this Heat Wave is only going to connect onto a water type and a fire type, and of course it misses the Ursaluna to begin with. So there is just damage coming out from the Flare Blitz on Incineroar. Juan is not threatened by that Encore at all, goes straight for damage, realizes that he needs to make an aggressive play and stop reacting to Gabriel's abilities. And now the Yawn is down on the Volcarona, and it will have to switch out or else it will go to sleep. And with no boost, Volcarona doesn't want to be here.
But it looks like Gabriel is comfortable making the same play we saw in game 2, encoring that Ursaluna into Yawn so it can't do damage.
Crucially, that Ursaluna being removed as a damage source does help Gabriel regain some of that momentum. But here gets the Incineroar once again on the field, getting the Intimidate down onto Juan's Incineroar, so making sure that that Pokemon is not going to be able to deal as much damage. Previously, we had Juan stick around for the Flare Blitz, but this time it's just the parting shot, so it's going to get out of here and not be stuck on the field, giving up that momentum to Gabriel.
I think if there is another Pokemon adjustment here from Juan, and honestly, now that I'm saying it, even if there isn't, I would be very curious to see the Rillaboom. Okay, there it is, the Sneasler. I was like, how do you set up the Sneasler for success? This is it.
Sneasler comes in against the Incineroar, which does have fake out pressure, but is not intimidated at all, and also has the ability, the Ninetales has just been yawned by the Blood Moon Ursaluna, so it will have to switch out or else fall asleep. And Sneasler has Swords Dance, loves a free turn.
Loves a free turn, and not just that. Even though it hasn't activated Unburden yet, because the Ninetales has to decide between staying in and switching out, staying in and going to sleep and switching out, it really does give the Sneasler the opportunity to set up, to feel confident in its placement. And if Gabriel does decide to switch in his own Rillaboom, he is going to be boosting the defenses of that Sneasler and also giving it a speed boost. This is a very costly play for Gabriel, and it's going to have to pay off, because if not, and Juan calls this and does go for the Swords Dance, this is going to be such a huge leap in his favor.
There's Rillaboom switching in for the Ninetales, activates the Grassy Terrain, which activates the Grassy Seed on Sneasler. Juan is reaping all of the benefits of this Grassy Terrain right now. Gets the defense boost, gets the Unburden boost, and finally switches out the Ursaluna for himself. That is going to be the Incineroar coming back in to get an Intimidate down onto both of the Rillaboom and Incineroar on Gabriel's side. High value Intimidate. Fake Out will connect onto the Sneasler, but that's okay. There's no threat of damage back to that Pokemon, and Juan, if the Fake Out had not come through, could have taken a huge advantage.
There still is another fake out though, and that's something that Gabriel has to go for. There's nothing scaring the Sneasler off the field. You can just hang out here for a couple turns until it is time to go for that Swords Dance, Acrobatics, Close Combat. Honestly, all of those look pretty great.
Yeah, they all look good to me, and Gabriel goes for the Terrestrialization on the Incineroar to protect itself from a Fake Out, as well to protect itself from a Close Combat from Sneasler. Gabriel has decided, I'm not getting any value out of Terrestrialization on any of my other Pokemon. Let me just get this Incineroar through this turn and we'll reevaluate from there. But that's the Swords Dance coming out from the Sneasler. Fake Out onto Rillaboom opened up the opportunity here. Parting Shot will try to start controlling the attack here, but because Swords Dance boosts 2 stages, it's still going to be at +1, and in order to try and keep that under control, that Incineroar is going to have to keep switching in and out, and every time that happens, there's a risk of damage on every other Pokemon.
There's an easy switch for Gabriel, though. Certainly you have to make a tough decision right now. Do you send in the Ninetales, risk breaking the Focus Sash next turn, or do you send in the Volcarona? You do get the defensive boost, but you're already at down half your health. But the following turn, you don't have to worry as much about the Acrobatics connecting with that Rillaboom at least, because Incineroar feels like a decent switch into that spot. And then you also mitigate that final attack boost from the Swords Dance, so not the worst way that could have played out for Gabriel, but still on the back foot. Ninetales really only offers encore support in this scenario.
So awkward.
Blizzard's not going to be doing the damage you need to turn the tides.
And Ninetales was also forced out onto the field as soon as snow ended.
Exactly.
So there's both no defense boost and there's no 100% accurate Blizzard. That's going to make Ninetales feel really weird about being out on the field right now, potentially locking into an Encore or a Disable to try and disrupt what Juan's got going. But in a complete reversal from Game 2, Juan is in the driver's seat right now. He is absolutely controlling this match.
And it's all because of that Sneasler. It's such an incredibly powerful Pokemon, especially when you're relying on the pivot pals. You have to respect it, and Gabriel is really struggling to respect it right now.
Now, this Ghost-type Incineroar, like you mentioned, kind of feels safe to switch in, although it does have to worry a little bit about potential knockoffs coming out from the opposing Incineroar. Ninetales will get the Disable off onto Sneasler, which means that they will no longer be able to use Acrobatics. That makes Rillaboom a little bit safer, but the knockoff will connect onto the Ghost-type Incineroar on the switch-in. Not enough to pick up a KO, but the combination of that Acrobatics and that knockoff has dealt a lot of damage to that Pokemon, and you need those Pokemon healthy to get those pivots.
Without the defense drop from a Close Combat, though, that turn, the Sneasler, I think, is going to stick around even longer. And yes, you can't use Acrobatics anymore, but Close Combat into that Ninetales or into a Pokemon that switches into the Ninetales is still looking pretty great for Juan. You have to worry about the Volcarona coming in and maybe a Flame Body activation starting to ruin your plans towards victory. And I do think that's a win condition that Gabriel has to start thinking about, given the Pokemon that Juan has remaining. But Juan is just getting closer and closer to that top 4 placement here at the Latin America International Championships.
Okay, well, this is a great opportunity for Gabriel. However, there is no switch from Juan, which means that Ninetales can lock the Incineroar into a knockoff. And of course, the Volcarona switching in means that it has used up its Grassy Seed, so this knockoff is dealing very little damage. Additionally, because the Sneasler has had the Acrobatics disabled, Volcarona has finally found an opportunity in this game to get a free turn.
And that free turn has to be used effectively. You want to get some damage on the field. You need to start evening up the score.
Absolutely, and you can see Gabriel knows that he has to start getting some damage down, even if it's not 100% accurate.
Blizzard and Heatwave, they can be your friends.
They can also be your frenemies.
Let's just hope that Gabriel gave his Pokemon plenty of sandwiches before this battle.
There is still very safe switch in here from Juan. The Incineroar can absolutely switch out here and bring in the Ursaluna instead, which has been terrestrialized into that water typing. We'll be able to absolutely resist all of these attacks while Sneasler just goes
no.
for a Swords Dance. Make sure that it wants to be able to deal as much damage as possible, but in the future turns, but it has to get through this turn first. The Heat Wave will miss one of Juan's Pokemon. That is the Ursaluna, so Sneasler still hangs on, but took a lot of damage on that turn.
I love the Swords Dance from Juan in that turn, because if Sneasler is able to outlast this Disable, which it should be able to protect this last turn, it will, or this couple of last turns, it will be able to deal so much damage. And that is something that Gabriel has to deal with. Now, there's a little bit of a guessing game here, as I do think that Sneasler could go for a protect this turn, or could just go straight for a close combat plus an attack from that Ursaluna Blood Moon into the Ninetales to pick up the knockout into that spot and get the Pokemon advantage. It's all just going to come down to reads.
Well, the read right now for Gabriel is, I want to see what you're going to do.
Which is a very safe play to make when there is so much on the line.
Yeah, that's a double protect. Close combat was going to try to target down the Ninetales from Juan's side. Of course, it does have +2 because it took that extra Swords Dance. And the Earth Power double up, Juan is trying to remove this Ninetales from the field.
Now, though, with the protect from Gabriel, that does ensure Juan can protect the Sneasler this turn. No more Disable.
No more Disable. The Disable will be free.
It's a really great spot for Juan. Again, that Swords Dance just paying off dividends. Could play a little bit risky here if he wanted to go for a second one, but we've seen players get punished for being greedy time and time again. I think you just have to play it safe here. Go for the protect. And that's exactly why we see Gabriel get the fake out back on the field once more.
Yep.
And he went for the attack.
Switch. Goes for the attack onto the Incineroar. If this Ursaluna doubled up, there is a chance that it could pick up that damage, but the Sneasler has gone down. That's a huge Pokemon removed from the field for Gabriel. The Earth Power will connect onto the Incineroar, so Juan did cover for the potential of a switch in there to take out both the Incineroar or the Volcarona had it stayed in.
The Ursaluna Blood Moon, though, still looking incredibly threatening on Juan's side of the field, recovering up all of that health to Gabriel's advantage. He does still have that Rillaboom available, and that's exactly why we see Juan switch in the Incineroar. And that's why Gabriel does not send in the Rillaboom just yet. Your next play to keep yourself in the game is to find a way to get Rillaboom on the field, either unintimidated or unincineroared.
Yeah, unintimidated or unincineroared.
I mean, it's one of the two.
Challenge, the challenge of Regulation H, and any regulation with Incineroar in it.
I mean, even if you do manage to get the Rillaboom on the field when Incineroar is already present, you run the risk of getting parting shotted. So there is still plenty of options here for Juan, and I think keeping the Ursaluna Blood Moon safe in the back is exactly what you want to see. And we get finally the reveal of that last Pokemon. Yeah,
it definitely was going to be the Rillaboom with the Sneasler and Incineroar here. So finally, Juan has forced to reveal the Rillaboom as Ninetales protects itself. Gabriel is reading that Juan is very afraid of the Ninetales, or again, just wants to see what Juan is going to do. Again, we did mention this in the previous match, maybe a little bit more relevant here. If we're going to see some of these double protect turns, time may become a major factor of the end game of this match.
For now, though, there's still a lot of interesting options in play for both of these trainers, as once again, we are looking at a situation where Gabriel can go for a Blizzard or a Heat Wave to threaten that Rillaboom. If Rillaboom risks the fake out into the Volcarona, a Flame Body activation could be absolutely devastating. And honestly, even an Encore from that Ninetales could be enough to open up the game for Gabriel, as if the Incineroar is locked into Fake Out, that ain't parting shot.
Yeah, Fake Out ain't parting shot. Doesn't do anything. There's the Rillaboom going for the Fake Out, finally connects, finally finds a target, connects on to the Ninetales. That means it will take this Heat Wave from Volcarona. Deals a little bit over half to the Rillaboom, and a critical hit onto the Incineroar deals a little bit more chip damage than expected, while the Flare Blitz will finally knock that Ninetales off of the field. So Gabriel is now forced down to his final 2 Pokemon, and that will be the Rillaboom and Volcarona. And for now, the key Pokemon on Juan's side that Gabriel is going to need to get rid of at ASAP is that Incineroar, which is looking really scary into these final 2 Pokemon.
Rillaboom on Gabriel's side of the field is running U-turn over high horsepower, which would be great into the opposing Rillaboom, and decent into the opposing Incineroar, but overall not going to be as helpful as a higher base power attack. Rillaboom is in a very tough position here as another Flare Blitz from Juan's own Incineroar is going to be doing a huge amount of damage to that Pokemon, and Volcarona, really this Heat Wave is not going to do enough to match that.
Okay, and the Pokemon that Juan needs to get rid of right now is the Rillaboom, so you can see the targeting there.
Yep.
The Heat Wave will miss Incineroar, but knocks out the Rillaboom. So getting that Pokemon off the field will bring the Blood Moon Ursaluna back out onto the field. But in a preview, the claws of Incineroar are out for Rillaboom. That's a KO, and Juan has gotten the Rillaboom off the field. Just this Volcarona is not going to have the damage against this Incineroar and this Blood Moon Ursaluna with the Yawn. That's going to be Juan Salerno advancing.